afternoon. Happy Friday. Happy July. I'm your host, C.C. O'Reilly, and you are tuning into another unbelievable, incredible, magnificent episode of the Saints and Alumni Show here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Thank you so much for joining us today on this wonderful Friday afternoon. And on today's show, we have an incredible story from Dr. Mary Krenceski from the class of 1977, who started here at Siena, coming down from Canton, New York, but then eventually went on to work in the area at GE, and then went on to UCONN, worked at Kodak, came back to the area, worked at GE, and also kind of, since retiring, has been working a lot with our Siena students as well. So we have a great Siena alumni story for you today, so don't go anywhere because you are listening to the Saints and Alumni Show here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Happy Friday. You're listening to the Saints and Alumni Show on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. I'm your host, C.C. O'Reilly, and thank you again for joining us today because we have an unbelievable, incredible, magnificent guest for you from the class of 1977, Dr. Mary Krenceski, all the way from Rensselaer, New York. Mary, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, it's great to be here, Colin. It's great to be back on campus, I have to say.
It's great to actually be able to invite guests back to campus today, too. And, you know, it's going to be that way moving forward, which is great, too. But you, throughout the pandemic, I remember, were walking around campus a little bit, too, when everything was kind of shut down. This is a nice walking place for you as well, being kind of local.
It is indeed. It is indeed. And it's away from traffic and very nice surroundings, like walking through gardens, actually, now.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot happening over the summer, so there's some routes on campus that you might not be able to walk, but we're thrilled to have you back today again as well.
Well, thank you.
Now, you recently, Mary, just to give people a background of what you've done, you have been helping out our Center for Education, Professional and Development Office, which is better known as a career center on campus. You've been, working with our students, helping them going into the, job process, the interview process as well, and preparing them for those. But before that, you were a high school student deciding you wanted to go into chemistry in college. Where did you grow up, and what made you end up choosing Siena College?
Well, I grew up in a little town in way northern New York, almost on the Canadian border. It's called Canton, New York.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the home of St. Lawrence University, which was one of the first higher education establishments in the United States, also one of the first that accepted women.
I did not know that part.
Yeah. And
well, shout out to St. Lawrence right there.
Yes, right. But it was too close to home. Mm-hmm. It was right across the street, literally right across the street from where I grew up. And I was not able to go to a Catholic high school. I went to a Catholic school through 8th grade, and I was not able to go to a Catholic high school. And I decided that
was it just boys only in the area? Was that it? Or
no,
was
it just was
offerings?
not available. Not available. Well, there was a Catholic high school about 35 miles away, but not doable really every day, especially not in northern New York in the winter.
Right.
So I started looking at schools, and I decided that I would limit my search to Catholic colleges. And Siena was very attractive because of their science division. So I knew going in that I wanted to major in chemistry. And that was actually a quick, and I've probably told you this before, a kind of a quick decision because I was taking chemistry at the time I was doing my applications. And I really liked it very, very much.
Everything was just clicking right away.
It was clicking. Yeah, that's right. And I really, really enjoyed the lab work. So that's what really that hooked me in. So I chose to apply early admission. And I think as a requirement, then you had to give at least a guess on your major, and I chose chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was easy for me. It was a lot of work. It was very difficult, but I could never figure out what I wanted to change my major to.
Yeah.
If I so thought about that. So
I would agree. I would think that most current chemistry majors would probably say the same thing right now. It's not easy.
It's not easy.
We just love it. Yeah.
And I especially liked the lab work, and the lab work gets more and more interesting the more advanced the chemistry courses are, and so I stuck with it and just slogged through. So it's very interesting. When I was at Siena, there were only 8 chemistry majors. So it's not like you could hide anywhere from the faculty. And the faculty was amazing in kind of looking out and encouraging, and also kind of giving you a little prod when you needed it, and telling you that you needed to spend more time on some of the coursework. And so it was an excellent choice for me. I did look at some other schools, and I remember driving home. It's a long way from here to Canton, New York. And my father was with me, and he said, "Well, it's your decision, but I really liked Siena College."
Oh, that's
and I
great.
did too. So
Yeah.
we were on the same wavelength already at that point.
Now, early on, that was 1974 when you first came to Siena.
Actually,
Not 73. 73. Sorry,
Yeah, fall of 73.
Carry the one, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And when you first came to Siena, obviously it was a different time. But some of the things I always say, the same type of Siena students come, and the same type of education is taught here as it was back then. Where when you were struggling in a major that you were taking, you had the faculty there, like you said, that gave you the nudge. They knew you. They knew what you were capable of as well. So they pushed you to an extent where you knew you needed to be pushed, like you said. So were there any faculty at the time, too, that you remember that were always kind of helping you steer clear in the right direction?
Oh, for sure. Certainly Paul Smith, Dr. Paul Smith. I had him, I think, the second half of my freshman year, and I stayed in quite close touch with him at Siena as well as afterwards. I used to get together with him a couple of times a year for dinner when I was in the area, and then when I moved back here. And he was certainly one. He was never one to really give out a lot of compliments, but certainly one to keep track of what was happening and prodding.
Yeah.
You need to spend more time. And he did something. I had a chemistry course that I had a lot of trouble with, and I was kind of ready to compromise in that course. And he would not accept that. And we used to get together for coffee in his office. And he said, "No, that's your last cup of coffee until you go and finish." It was an organic qualitative analysis course. "Until you finish your unknowns. So when you have finished your unknowns, you can come back and I'll be happy to make you a cup of coffee." And at the time I was very offended. But I ended up with an A in that course, just almost to spite him. But how silly is that? It was really to my advantage.
Absolutely. And it's hard to see that in the moment as well.
It is very difficult. And I think when you're 19 or 20 years old, it's even more difficult to appreciate where that's going to go.
Absolutely.
So I also very much appreciated Father Martin Hanhauser. I never had Father Martin as a faculty person. I never took a course with him, but he was always in the evenings. He was always sitting in his office in Roger Bacon Hall. And he taught math, and I struggled in calculus and differential equations, and Father Martin was always there with an encouraging word and some help. And so I appreciated that very much. I wasn't the only one who took advantage of his,
I bet.
if you will, office hours in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
It meant a lot to me that he would take the time, even though I wasn't really a student of his.
Right. And I think that does lend a hand to kind of the environment of Siena. If you're not an alumni of Siena, if you've never taken the classes here, it's not that type of hoarding that you see at some bigger universities where somebody might think, okay, well, I want to get this student to become one of my students. Let's talk them into switching majors over to my department so my numbers go up. Here it's more along the lines of let's help figure out what's the best course for you. Mm-hmm. Clearly, you were passionate about chemistry, and with being any type of science major, there is a math requirement where you usually, it's extensive, but it's what you need to go on to that next level. And throughout your 4 years here, obviously you did quite well because you ended up going on eventually to UCONN. And
yes.
As somebody who recruited in Connecticut for admissions for several years, I could say that is the number one school for anyone that wants to go to, especially when they're good athletically. That's basically where they want to go. Now, I believe it was their program, though, that actually ended up kind of gaining your interest in applying there.
Yes, so after I graduated from Siena, I worked for 2 years at GE Plastics. Right here in the area. It was in Selkirk, New York at the time, and that was a contact that was made through a Siena graduate, who a fellow chemistry major who graduated a year before I did. And after 2 years, I didn't wait till the end of the 2 years. During my time at GE Plastics, I realized that the work that I really wanted to do and that I could see other people were doing required an advanced degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I started taking graduate level courses at Union College, but it was really difficult to work all day, drive over there, sit through class and stay awake, and then carve out time for homework.
And to put your best effort into it too, because
Absolutely.
I think that's the one crossroads most people have when they are working and also trying to attain an advanced degree is that, are you putting the effort in to actually get the grade or just to pass the course, or are you trying to learn the material to better yourself professionally?
Right. And that it just became obvious that the way to really do that was to do it full time.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to major in Polymer Science. So at the time, the list was quite short in the United States for schools that offered a graduate degree in Polymer Science. So I ended up at the University of Connecticut. And again, I got lucky, very lucky there. My advisor there was like a member of my family by the time I got my degree. Just a wonderful, wonderful, generous man. But I had found that even though I was very nervous about going to graduate school after I had been out for 2 years, because I was a little bit older, I had not been in a classroom in several years, I was very well prepared from Siena. That was a really pleasant surprise, I do have to say.
And that's always great for us to hear as well, because I think being a liberal arts school, which also for the longest time in the Capital District, people were always considering us a business school because of the high quality business education. But the one thing I always have to laugh about is science always kind of gets overlooked at Siena. And it's not to say that people don't know how great the quality is of graduates from our science department. It's just, especially when you look at the statistics of students that go on to med school, as well as the students that go on to get their advanced degrees, the job placement statistics are all there as well. It's just being a liberal arts institution, I think that's one of our hidden gems that students find out along the way, or they're visiting and they see the Saint Center and they're like, wait, I can do this here? It just takes a little bit of explaining, but it's kind of one of the features that I think retains those science students as well. They're not coming in and we raise the bar once they get here, which is even better too, but letting them do the research that they're able to do early on. Now, really quickly though, just because I know, we have a lot more to get to after UConn and while you're still at UConn and what you're deciding to do next before you go to Western New York, but we unfortunately have to go to a quick break. Can we have you hang out for a little bit more?
Sure.
Well, you're listening to the Saints and Alumni show here on WVCR featuring Mary Krenceski from the class of 1977, only on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Saints and Alumni show on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. I'm your host, C.C. O'Reilly, and again, we are joined by Dr. Mary Krenceski from the class of 1977. And again, Mary, thank you so much for just filling us in on your Siena story and the great, memories you have just going through the chemistry department here. But we just left off talking about your time at UConn, and you had some great mentors that kind of started to help you learn in polymer sciences and kind of pivot into your next career role. What was one of the most beneficial moments at your time getting your advanced degree at UConn?
Oh, my goodness. It opened up doors for me that I didn't know weren't open before that. And I always encourage people to get an advanced degree, even though it looks like it's going to be really a long time and that it's going to be difficult. And it is. It is a long time. It is difficult. It is an investment in your life, but it is so worth it. And the opportunities when I was getting out of graduate school in 1984, many companies were looking to hire women, particularly women with advanced technical degrees. So I didn't have any trouble getting a job offer. I had, I think, by the time I got done, 4 or 5 job offers, and I ended up taking the job offer that was the lowest salary in Rochester, New York with Kodak, Eastman Kodak Company. At the time, Kodak was a real gem and a really challenging place to work because the technology spanned so many different areas, not just photographic science, which is, of course, what they're known for, but there were a lot of new and groups that required polymer science background. So it was just an incredible opportunity. And I happened to hit the the time frame, I was there for 10 years, and I hit the time frame when they were basically at their peak. So there were a lot of people in Rochester, New York, who worked for Eastman Kodak Company. I think something like 68,000 people.
Oh, my grandfather was one
Amazing.
of them. Yeah, absolutely. And it's such anyone from Central or Western New York remembers the time of Kodak, and it's similar to the time of GE in Schenectady when it was as big as it was before it kind of started downsizing. And that happens all the time, and it happens to so many different organizations and corporations. But for your time in Rochester, how long did you end up staying out in the 585 area code?
So I was there from 1984 until 1994. I have to. There's a small caveat in there. I took if you will, a year, and did what I call an industrial postdoc. So I spent a year in Germany as a visiting scientist at a university.
Wow.
And that was not something that Kodak normally arranged. They didn't. They gave me a leave of absence to do that. But that was absolutely a life-changing decision. It was something I had decided when I was interviewing. People always ask the question about where do you see yourself in 5 years? And my answer was, I want to do something outside of the country in polymer science in 5 years. And I actually had a manager who was very supportive of that. So it worked out, and that really and truly was a life-changing experience.
That is a blessing, too, just to be able to have that type of opportunity. When we tell students when they're touring colleges, like, listen, take this a time to go abroad because you're not going to get this opportunity a lot after you graduate. And you luckily did. And I think you're kind of got to be right place, right time, and also be willing to take opportunity when it comes about. And if you have that leave of absence time and you also are willing to bet on yourself, because that's one thing I'm always amazed by PhD graduates, because you're betting on yourself the entire time, knowing, like, for anyone who was in graduate school, it always surprises you when you're in the last semester. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm done. It's coming up. Here it is. But for PhD students, they've had that ticking clock the entire time, because at the end you have to prove something that has not been proven before.
Yes,
and
that's true.
It's amazing to me that just to do that in such a specialty field like polymer science. I give you a lot of credit on that.
Well, thank you.
And it led to something that obviously you found your passion, which I think is a real tough thing for students in high school to know. I watched this show. I like this career based on the show. I want to be, I'm going to be a biochemical engineer. But who do you know what that is at 17? And you know what goes into becoming that. So that's terrific that you had that kind of pathway where when you were at UCONN, did you know Kodak was even on the table in terms of a company you wanted to work for?
I didn't at the beginning, but after maybe a year, or let me see, it was probably in my second or third year, someone from my research group got a job at Kodak. So that was a real, real acknowledgement of the work, the type of work that could happen. That it wasn't just photographic type work; it was imaging work all the time, but not just traditional photographic silver halide chemistry. And that was excellent when I interviewed there, because I had a very good friend on the inside, if you will. The first question I asked him was, "What don't you like about working here?"
Just as
I've
important
heard
of a
all
question.
the great things from the other people, but you tell me, I really appreciate your honesty. What don't you like working here?
Mm-hmm.
And so he was very honest with me, and he said, "Oh, there's just so much opportunity here, and if you don't like the project that you're given in the beginning, you can change that. You can move to a different area." So that was really very powerful. I learned a lot at Eastman Kodak Company.
I can imagine.
A lot.
And then in 1994, you decided to come back to the 518 area to work for GE. And that seems like it was almost perfect timing, because I feel like at that point, Kodak had almost peaked in terms of where they were going for the long haul. In terms of GE was still coming up at that point. They were, downsizing, but going in a new strategic way. So what was that calling like for you to come back to the area, 518?
So again, a really good friend of mine, somebody that I had known and shared a lab with at the University of Connecticut. I also shared a lab with him at Kodak. And he had been there about 7 or 8 years when he moved to what was then GE Silicones in Waterford, New York. And literally when the day he made his announcement that he was leaving, and no one left Kodak. I mean, that was just like a very rare thing.
Right.
But I went down and I said to him, "Listen, if you see any other job opportunities, would you please let me know?" Because I really wanted to come back to this area. I liked it very much. And my husband really was tied to this area as well. And his second day on the job, he contacted me and said, "We're looking for another Polymer Science. Get your paperwork in right away."
Oh, that's amazing.
So it was. Again, I tell people it's all about networking.
Yes.
Looking for jobs and looking to move. It's all about networking. And you start your network right here at Siena College. That's how I got my first job. And so, you don't have to go to uncomfortable meetings and force yourself on people.
I feel like networking has this certain, negative connotation to it where you're like, all right, got to stand there, have a business card, firm handshake, have an elevator pitch. It's not always just that. That is networking.
That is networking also.
It's loosely so many other things as well.
And it can be so much easier
Yes.
when you tap into your
not to put you on the spot, by the way, but I've known you for over a year now, and I can say you aren't that type of person that wants to go to a big open room and just be like, "Hey, how are you?" So, and that's for other types of people that are in that kind of boat and they're not extroverted. It's something that's like, "Oh, all right, you're networking with coworkers in the same field as you." And I think
exactly
for me, that's working in higher ed, that's constant. Everyone talks depending on where they're from and what the school is doing compared to what we can do and how can we all help each other. And that's a network that you're probably very fortunate to be a part of if you've kind of learned the trade a little bit.
Well, and also when you have worked with people, they know your skill set.
Exactly.
They know your strengths. They know where you might need some development, but they know what you're good at. And so there's no stronger recommendation that you can have where someone who's already in a workplace speaks up for a contact coming in.
Absolutely. And, so just get kind of, I want to wrap up the rest of, because you are retired now and you've done a lot in that time.
I am retired.
And you're still kind of working, though, at the same time,
It's
volunteering
true.
for a lot of different things. I want to get to those. But, while you're at GE, it's in a changing time as well. It was GE Silicone, but then it eventually became Momentive.
Yes, but I was actually not in Waterford when it became Momentive. I was at the GE Global Research Labs in Niskayuna for 2 years. And during that time is when the company GE sold the company to a private equity firm. And so then it became Momentive. And when I left the research labs, I actually went to work for a small company, small woman-owned company, it's a very successful company. It's called Extreme Molding in Watervliet. And again, through networking with someone I had worked with at GE, and I learned a lot there in about 3.5 years. And one day I got a call to come and interview at Momentive from a friend of mine who, again, I had worked with several times.
Yep.
And with people that I had already worked with. So that was a little bit strange, very different character for the interview. But it was absolutely, something that people that I enjoyed working with and had worked with in the past. And so I went back to what is now Momentive and was there for 9 years and retired from Momentive.
And that, we always tell students now, you're going to change careers 4 to 7 times after you graduate. So be willing to change. And you always were in a similar type of field, but at the same time, you were willing to take the risk to go from one large corporation to another or to a startup and just take chances. And I think that's something that you got to give a lot of credit to, just kind of the foundation as well here at Siena, where you have to learn to be a little different. There's a liberal arts core for a reason, so that you can communicate. You have to have those conversations in front of the worst people to do a presentation in front of, your friends. So they're trying to make you laugh. You got to actually present, and then by the time you graduate, it's not as scary. And I think that's something that is a huge tool for graduates when they leave. And, since retiring, you've been very grateful with your time. You've helped our chemistry department, which we can't thank you enough for. But, you also help mentor our students that aren't just chemistry students, And I encourage other alumni that want to get involved to do something like this as well, where they come back, ask, how can I help? Because what you were able to do this spring virtually, I give you so much credit for, because I had to sit down with my mom for just a teacher Zoom and then come back and then figure out the audio and then figure out the microphone. There were 3 trips to Cohoes from Saratoga for me to get her up and running. But you were able to present to a bunch of college students about how to properly interview at a college fair that's virtual. And we can't thank you enough for that as well. So in that time, what was your favorite and least favorite part about kind of coming back and working with our students? I like to ask that part.
Well, I love working with students and young people because it keeps me young.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it gives me a very different perspective. The favorite part, I guess, is being able to share information that maybe it would be much more difficult for them to get.
Yeah.
So when the preparation that you're referring to for the job fair, I had done a lot of courses when I was at GE and Kodak in interviewing and how to interview and proper interview questions. And there's no reason to keep that private. Why not share that information with people who are interviewing? And there are some surprising things in there that I always kind of I find it amusing now when I tell people that your skill in putting the interviewer at ease says a lot, and it can often make the difference whether you get a job offer or not. Absolutely. And I recognize that it's a time when you're very nervous and you don't really know the situation, and now you've got another job to put the interviewer at ease, but that person is often doing something that's very far out of their comfort zone and not in their job description.
Absolutely.
And so but it really puts you, it allows you to stand out and to make an impression then with the interviewer.
Absolutely. Well, we got 1 more minute left. What was your least favorite part working with us virtually?
Oh, working virtually.
There it is. Okay.
I would so much rather be in person. It's a lot easier in person, just because you can read body language and so forth. But we've had to deal with the situation.
And you know what? Thankfully, it's over. And a year from, actually less than a year away, is your 45th reunion.
Ooh.
I know, but
Yikes.
in that year, though, we're going to make sure that we get you back on campus to do the show again, but right after we have you speak to our students in person.
That'll be great. That'll be great.
Wonderful. Well, Mary, thank you so much for coming on the Saints and Alumni Show today. We can't thank you enough for all that you do for Siena. And as always, this show comes on every single Friday on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. If you'd like to come on and you are an alumni, reach out to our office. Just go to alumni@siena.edu and then message us, and we'll follow up about having you on the show. But Mary, again, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Colin, for having me. I appreciate it.
Anytime. And as always, if you've had half as much fun listening to the show as we've had doing it, well, then we've had twice as much fun doing the show as you've had listening. You're listening to 88.3 The Saint, the station where we play anything. Go Saints.